red, which is fight or flight, and blue, which is freeze. And she goes into detail about what body, face, and voice looks like for each. I find it amazing how the body changes when you go into the different pathways, fight or flight or freeze. And I'm going to give an example. So let's imagine like you have a student, or maybe it's your own child, because it works both ways, that has just gotten out of fight or flight. So they've done things to help regulate their body. They're back in social engagement. So you start talking to them, you start reasoning with them, right? Because you have to regulate before you can reason. You start reasoning with them and they tell you, I didn't hear a word you said. Like, what are you talking about? When I was upset, when they were in fight or flight, they didn't hear a word you said. And there's research behind that. Research shows that when in fight or flight, the middle ear muscles shift away from distinguishing the nuances of human voices to hearing low frequencies and predatory sounds. So in all honesty, that they probably didn't hear what you were saying. So the body itself, when in fight or flight, the ear muscles actually contract and only hear certain frequencies and certain sounds. It goes back to that survival mode pretty much, that fight or flight, you're going to fight off a predator, you're going to flee from a predator, or freeze, the blue pathway. Freeze is essentially preparing for death. So I kind of geek out on that stuff sometimes, I feel like, but I find it interesting and good to know, even when working with students and recognizing when they're in fight or flight and realizing, okay, so I really need to work on regulation before I'm going to be able to get anywhere with the student. So, okay, Melanie, next slide. All right, so stop number 2. We're going to talk about regulation versus dysregulation. Regulation strategies, body sensations, and co-regulation. One of my favorite quotes that goes with co-regulation is, when little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it's our job to share our calm, not join their chaos. And we'll talk a little bit more about co-regulation here in a minute. So regulation versus dysregulation. Melanie did a fantastic job talking about bottom up versus top down. And we're going to go a little bit more into detail about the difference between regulation and dysregulation and what it looks like. So regulation is the ability to keep your body in a state of calm, balance, and control, so felt safety is achieved. Dysregulation, the body does not feel safe. The student's ability to function is compromised. They are not able to meet the demands or expectations of the external environment, and they are functioning from the brainstem. So there's a couple things that stand out there in that definition to me. The first part is does not feel safe. And that brings me back to the 3 biological states. So if they don't feel safe, and when they're dysregulated, it puts them into fight or flight or freeze. And the other part is they're functioning from their brainstem. So when they are dysregulated, that learning part of the brain is shut down. They cannot access their logical thinking, the cortex, that front part of the brain. They're only functioning from their brainstem. So what does that look like in the classroom? Or what does dysregulation look like? It could look like overly intense emotions, impulsive behaviors, trouble making decisions, inability to manage behavior, lack of emotional awareness, and even avoids difficult emotions. And Melanie did touch on the sequence of engagement. We'll talk about it just a little bit more, but the sequence of engagement was created by Dr. Bruce Perry. And as you can see, you take in your surroundings from your 5 senses and input from the inside world as well, and it funnels through up to the cortex. So if you're working with a student who's dysregulated, it's important to remember that if they're at their brainstem, you have to regulate, relate before you can reason, the 3 R's. So here's a quick example. I don't know about you, but I'm one of the people that get called in my building to go help to diffuse some of those situations or help students who are dysregulated. So let's say I get called down to a classroom, and when I enter the classroom, the student has dumped their entire desk all over the floor. They're screaming, they're yelling. When I go in, I'm like, okay, I can clearly tell that the student is in fight or flight. They are functioning from the brainstem. If I were to go in there and say, okay, you need to go pick up all of this stuff and start to do, it's only going to increase that dysregulation even more. So knowing that, I need to help the student get to a place to where they can regulate their body. And then more than likely that may not be in the classroom because because there's so much going on in a classroom at that time. So what I try to do, or I guess a trick that I have found really helpful to get a student to walk with me, we actually have a regulation room, which I'll talk a little bit more on here in a minute, in our elementary school. So I usually use distraction with a student. I find what the student's interested in, whether it's Pokemon, unicorns, who knows what they're interested in, sports. And I try to talk to them a little bit about that to see if that would kind of get them opened up to the option of coming with me to walk down to take a break in our regulation room. So once they're in the regulation room, they get to choose different tools to help their body become regulated. Then we can relate, and then we can talk about reasoning of why they dumped out their desk in the first place. And then make sure that we go and we pick everything up once they're regulated, and talk through it and see what we can do to fix the issue so it doesn't happen next time.
So Misty, something that I heard you saying is that was ingrained in that is movement.
Absolutely.
So you're talking about from the bottom up, you have to have the body move to get up to that cortex. If we're just having them sit there and sit and think about it and then try to talk to them, they're shut down.
Yep.
Their brain is shut down, isn't it?
100%. Yep. This is Robin Goebel is a phenomenal person on the lines of working with students with big baffling behaviors. She has a new book out too. That's really great, but this is one of her quotes. Teaching coping skills to a dysregulated child is like focusing on the decorations when you are earthquake proofing your house. It's way more important to strengthen the foundation, not nail picture frames to the wall. If the house collapses, it doesn't really matter if the picture frames didn't fall down. So one thing I really take from this, if you have a student who's dysregulated, trying to teach them anything in that moment, you're not going to really get anywhere. You have to remember the 3 R's: regulate, relate, and reason. Okay, so regulation strategies. This is for both the counselor trying to teach a student or a skill or even a lesson, and the teacher trying to teach and meet academic standards. It's important to remember that you have to be able to reach the cortex, the student's body has to be regulated. And we can do that multiple ways. Today, we're really going to focus on tier 1 strategies. I feel like this could probably be a presentation all in itself, just because there are so many things out there. But just today, we're going to primarily talk about tier 1 strategies. What can this look like in the classroom? But first, before we really get into that, I do want to talk about body sensations and how important that is. Melanie was talking about, the stomach ache, right? We have a lot of students who go to our school nurse because of stomach aches, or their head hurts because they think they're sick. Well, maybe it's not really that you're sick. Maybe it is because you are having these sensations because it's stress, or because you are sad, or in making those connections with them, I feel like is really important. I feel like we need to start having conversations with students about the different sensations in their body. And if they can identify the sensations in their body, they can better label the feelings that they're having and be able to choose a correct regulation strategy that will help their body. Secondly, offering tier 1 strategies, and what does that look like? I feel like sometimes it's really easy to be able to just give one option of a regulating strategy for a classroom. Could be go noodle, it could be just a breathing technique. I feel very strongly that everybody, or every student's body, even anyone's body, each student's body is different and needs different regulation activities. And I'm going to kind of show you an example of what that can look like here in a minute. But the different regulation strategies are focusing, calming, energizing, and connection. We actually have, and I'll show it again here in a minute too, you'll see on under the resources over to the right, we have USD 258 regulation menus. Our instructional coach, Haley Ellison, did a fantastic job and created some regulation menus that touch on each of those points, that when a student's in a classroom, they can actually be able to pick what kind of regulation strategies will work for their body. And just to talk a little bit about other things that you can use and resources over here to the right, we have 101 brain breaks from Neurologic. Fantastic book. That's where those strategies came from for the regulation menus. My Neurologic classroom is phenomenal too. It actually has the 60 beats per minute on it. It also has a lot of different things, even about if you have a safe space or chill zone in your classroom, how to set something like that up. It has for like high school, how you could implement different movement breaks during the different class periods. It has some really, really good options on there, and it has all of the different strategies on there too, with videos on how to add some of those different regulation strategies with movement into your classroom. The 60 beats per minute, I absolutely love. We play that all day long in our regulation room. Research shows that music played at 60 beats per minute can help calm the lower parts of the brain. And to be completely honest, I was a little nervous about the presentation today, so I was listening to that before getting on, and I can feel my body just kind of lower down and get a little bit more calm. So I absolutely love the 60 beats per minute. It's a good regulation tool to even use if you have students coming in the mornings, just to have it on in the background, or maybe you're waiting, or maybe you're a school counselor working in skills in the classroom and they're doing group work. It's good to have on just in the background too. Let's see. Okay, so tier 1, what does tier 1 regulation strategies look like in the classroom? I'm going to show Melanie, if you want to go to the next one and just hang on for a second before you play. Okay. This is one of our 5th grade classes here in Humboldt. The teacher, Mrs. Lucas, has done an amazing job of educating her students on regulation versus dysregulation, choice when it comes to regulation strategies. So she's actually taught them multiple regulation strategies. And before they transition to an activity, she allows them to pick whatever their body needs in that moment before they move on to the next activity. So Melanie, if you want to go ahead and hit play, you can kind of see what that looks like.
Boys and girls, as we get ready to transition into science, we're going to give our bodies what they need, okay? If you're feeling tired, what should you do? Okay, that's 1. If you need a minute to breathe, what should you do to calm yourself? Breathing boxes or friction, okay? What if you need connection? Talk to people or chat with somebody, okay? You have about 2 minutes to give yourself what you need, okay? If you need to stretch, if you're feeling sleepy, you can stretch your legs.
Okay, so as you can see, she has done an absolute amazing job of educating her students on what their bodies need to help regulate them to get ready to move to the next activity. And this is work that takes a lot of time. It's not something that can just quickly be done. It has taken a little while for her to be able to get to that point with. It's absolutely amazing to see when they're able to pick which regulation strategy their body needs in that moment before moving on to the next activity.
Okay. There we go.
All right, perfect. And here are those regulation menus that I was talking about. Our instructional coach, Haley Ellison, put these together. Absolutely phenomenal. We have a high school teacher that has them hanging up in her classroom. So students, the QR codes lead them to the video so they can actually see what it looks like to do that exercise. So if they need a calming exercise, an energizing exercise, or a focusing exercise, they have that right there at their fingertips.
Can we just stop and say what an amazing resource this is? This is probably the one that I'm most excited about. Just right there at their fingertips, ready to go. If they need those reminders, it can be used at different age levels, different grade levels. I just think this is so awesome. Thank you for providing this. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Haley, for creating it. Okay, everyone out there, what is a strategy that works for you when you start to notice that your body is becoming dysregulated? So we've kind of talked about student dysregulation, but we're going to switch to talking about educator dysregulation. So scan that QR code if you can, or go to the website slido.com and enter that number. What is a strategy that works for you when you start to notice your body becoming dysregulated?
I love it. Music, yep. Breathing, a drink of water, walking. belly breaths, music. Tell you what, that 60 beats per minute is pretty awesome. Going for a walk, being outside and taking deep breaths. The
Yes, fresh
cold,
air.
yeah, the cold actually has been proven to reset your nervous system. If you get a cold drink of water or go outside in the cold, can help.
Yes, I had a mini fridge in my office, and I would keep cold water for students and also for parents coming in.
Yep. Lights out. Yep. Breathing. Very good.
Okay. Thank you all for sharing. All right, so Missy talked a little bit about regulating. Now I want to talk to you just a little bit about relating and how important the science of connection is in our school system. So we want you to think of connection as social medicine. When I took some trainings from Dr. Jennifer Sweeten, she talked about how important it is to connect and build those positive relationships and what it actually does to our body systems. It's scientific studies say that it actually, when I have a connection with people around me and I'm feeling safe, it reduces my cortisol levels. And remember earlier why we said that was so important? When we have an overload of cortisol, it can actually shrink the hippocampus in our brain. And we're not able to retrieve memories like we should or encode, okay? So what we can do to prevent that is making sure that we are exercising. We talked about movement, doing our omega-3s, doing our blueberries, and of course that yummy dark chocolate for some of us. How about blueberries and dark chocolate? That sounds pretty good. Just doing those things and teaching those skills to our students, making sure that we're getting adequate sleep, okay? Because we want to reduce those cortisol levels. We want to increase oxytocin, that love hormone, all right? So the less cortisol, the less hippocampal damage. It reduces that amygdala activation, that part of their brain that's saying danger, danger. We're thinking everything's a threat. It doesn't have to be if we feel like we're in a safe environment with people that care about us. Less anxiety. And we know that a little less stress is used to motivate us versus discipline or shame. And what we know about that is when we teach students about stress, we don't want to get rid of stress. That's not possible. A little bit of stress is good for us. It motivates us. It helps us to study for that test or be ready for the athletic event, or like Misty was saying, be ready for the presentation, and using skills to help us decrease that stress, whether it's the 60 beats per minute, the breathing exercises, going for a quick walk, whatever works for you. It provides that safe environment where our students are more likely to be ready to learn. Because again, like we talked about at the very beginning of the presentation, the whole purpose of this is to build resilient learners and resilient educators. And it helps us also feel seen, valued, and heard. So Dr. Lori D, another one of her famous quotes, when we understand that connection is the biggest driver for regulation, we're then able to share our calming presence to help others in their storms. In co-regulatory practices, we are sharing a sanctuary of safety through our offered presence. She talks about building that nest and offering that calming presence and safety. What is co-regulation? The good news is you can be the intervention. Co-regulation is when we are in the presence of someone and we actually have our mirror neurons that are working and to help reset a student's distressed brain. But on the other hand of that, if we are in distress or we're in dysregulation, that can actually cause our students to become dysregulated. So we know that behavior is communication. If we want our students to begin to regulate, we have to put ourselves in a place of regulation as well. And I know sometimes we're humans, it's hard. Again, we bring stuff that's happened, from our homes, from our work, but we are the adults in the situation. We have to figure out what works for us. Because unfortunately, what happens with a lot of our students, they're not seeing that self-regulation modeled at home, okay? So it takes them longer to co-regulate at school. So here, just because of time sake, we've got several resources we're not going to go through, but some really good ones. I know that when Mal and I presented before, we've talked about that 15-minute focus, regulation, co-regulation, tons of information. And then that co-regulation practices from the field. Dr. Lori and several of our students have put together a wonderful pamphlet, and we have the link here, of things that staff can do together to regulate and that students and staff can do together.
All right, so connection can be both the outcome and the intervention. So how can educators co-regulate? Co-regulating, you have to first, like Melanie talked about, regulate yourself, because the mirror neurons are 100% true. You have to making eye contact, be curious and see understanding. Make sure you listen again. Make sure you get down on their level, because I think that is really important as well. You're not hovering over them. Showing empathy, offer warm affection, focus on emotions driving behavior, not the behavior. Don't correct the child's behavior. Focus on modeling the behavior that you want them to mirror, essentially, and that rupture repair model. Melanie, do you want to touch briefly on that model?
Sure. Sorry, I was answering somebody's question in the chat there. So I'm a little off here. Rupture and repair. I was listening to a podcast. We Can Do Hard Things with Glennon Doyle. And the guest speaker was talking about how there's a difference between trying to repair a relationship and just apologizing. Okay. Rupturing and repairing a relationship means that you are getting down on their level. You're saying, you know what? I know I'm the adult. I made a mistake. I am so sorry, and apologizing, and then talking about how we can move forward. And they talked about how it's never too late to do this. Sometimes we think, oh my gosh, it's already been a couple hours, or it's already been a couple of days. It's too late to repair relationships. Here's the deal. We're human beings. We're all under different types of stress. And so when you do that, you are modeling with them about the importance of repairing a rupture and repairing relationships. Thank you, Rita. Mallory put Rita on there. She's another great example of that as well.
Perfect.
Anything
Thank
else
you,
to add to
Melanie.
that, Misty?
Yeah, I'll talk real quick about the sayings on dysregulation for students.
Okay.
I have under the resources just some ideas of things you could offer students when they're dysregulated. Just saying, you know what, I'm here for you. I can see your body is really upset. What do you feel like your body needs right now? I think these are really important. I've created for my staff, we were going to hand them out on Monday at our in-service, but that got canceled due to weather. It's a dysregulation, co-regulation, little ID badge, I guess you could say, that has options for educators when you're working with a student who's really dysregulated and they're yelling at you and they're screaming at you, they could be hitting you or kicking you. It's hard to think about co-regulation in that time. So it's got some ideas of how you can ground yourself and help your body become co-regulated. It also has those sayings on it as well, those that you can offer to students. So if you were kind of having a rough time thinking of what you could say, that's on there for our educators and our teachers. I do also want to talk really quickly about, we have here in our district a tap out system, and it's okay. Like when you're working with a dysregulated student and you can tell that your body's not regulated, it's okay to say, okay, I need to tap out and I need to go regulate my body, and have someone kind of come and take over, essentially, that who might be a little bit more regulated than you in that moment. And it's okay to do that and have that understanding that you're human. Like it's totally okay. If you need to tap out, we can tap out, because there's other people here on my team that are phenomenal that can help as well. Okay, so stop number 3. We're going to talk a little bit about outward, inward behaviors and body sensations. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so outward, inward behaviors. Behaviors are like smoke signals. They are the clues and roadmaps to a destination where we may not have traveled. When Melanie and I were talking, we talked a lot about the differences in behaviors when it comes to elementary school, middle school, and high school. Elementary school, we're seeing a lot of outward behaviors: hitting, kicking, biting, spitting, hiding under things, just a lot of the outward. Middle school, high school, it's more dissociation, some like more of that freeze mode, I feel like, is what we're seeing. So just distinguishing between outward and inward behaviors and what that looks like at each level, I feel like is important.
Dr. Dan Siegel has a wonderful, just quick saying: if you can name it, you can tame it. And I love this because we know that if noticing and naming your body sensations is about half the battle. So again, if we could teach this to our students and to our staff, that would be very helpful.
Okay, so body sensations. We did touch on this just briefly before, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more now, and some of the things that resources wise might give you some ideas too. So body sensations, we all have sensations. We used to teach zones of regulation here in our district, but feelings don't have colors, feelings have sensations. If we can identify sensations in our bodies, our hope is that students will be able to distinguish what kind of tools they can use to help their bodies get regulated. So some resources that I've used over to the right is Listening to My Body. It's a great book to do skill lessons with. We do have a regulation room, and that's the book that I used at the very beginning of the year to when each class came into our regulation room, where we talked about sensations. I also have I have sensation posters I created, and I have them hanging in the regulation room as well, so students can see it. And we have silhouettes of kids drawn out with the different sensations and where they're located in the body. We also have our sensation buddies. Each student who wants to have one has a sensation buddy, and our little buddies change throughout the season. So I think right now we have a Yeti monster, I think is what we have up. And the students get to come in and they pick their sensation buddy and they put the dots that go along with where they're feeling it. So there's sensations in each color, and they put it on the body where they feel it. And even I found that just the part where they pick it off and stick it on their buddy is regulating in itself. We're gonna go over a few examples too. How much time do we have, Melanie? Should we go over?
Are running close on time. So if you want to do one example, that would be great.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. So let's just go with student number 1. So student number 1 is saying that their heart is racing, they feel hot, and they have clenched fists. So from those sensations, it tells me that the student could possibly be in fight or flight. So knowing that they're in fight or flight, I'm going to help them be able to choose a tool. We go by proprioception. All of our tools in our regulation room are proprioception based to help their body become regulated. And proprioception actually is connected to the nervous system and helping it regulate. I have a little bit more information on our resource page. If you want information on our regulation room and kind of how it's set up, I'll show you where to find that here in just a little bit. But you're welcome to go back and read through those different scenarios, but there's one that talks about fight or flight and also, or freeze, more for elementary and then high school, middle school as well.
So when you think about middle school and high school ages, our district quite a while back did zones of regulations just because we needed to start with something. We needed a common vocabulary. But what we noticed is with high school, middle school students, maybe isn't the best, definitely isn't the tier 1. So one of the strategies that a co-counselor used, if you know Sharon Stewart, she retired a couple years ago, love her so much. She used to use HALT. And it's really just learning, helping staff and students to kind of check in with themselves, notice their body sensations, notice what's going on. So kind of a little funny meme there when you're hungry and someone's trying to be funny. It's not so funny, right? You kind of get that hangry thing going on. So the H stands for hungry. And you think about it, all right, is what I'm sensing. Am I hungry right now? Am I thirsty? A stands for angry or really just feelings right now. The L is like, hey, am I feeling kind of lonely right now? Do I need some connection? And T is tired. Do I need a rest? Do I need to check on my sleep? What's going on with my body? So again, this is kind of like an older student version of just learning to check in with themselves. And staff, we use it too.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end, stop number 4. Where do we go from here? We've gone over a lot of information in a very short amount of time today. So we'll talk about what could this look like, where you're at in your district a little bit, and what could you do. And we'll go over some resources that we have that really summarizes everything we've gone over today. So where do we go from here? And I feel like this really depends on where you are at in your district with this type of work. Talking about behaviors can be challenging because I feel like when it comes to those consequences, natural consequences, things like that, it can challenge people's beliefs and values. It can be difficult at times. If you're kind of just starting out, a great place to be is a book study with maybe some teachers or maybe just some friends. There's some great books. I have listed Connections Over Compliance by Dr. Lori Desautels. Intentional Neuroplasticity is her newer one. And then What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry is a great one to start with too. It touches on the trauma part of it. So those are great conversations to just start having with your staff as you work through those book studies. thinking about conversations with administrators and superintendents, looking at PD opportunities for next year for your staff. What could that look like? And just trying co-regulation strategies, being very mindful of your own body. Educator regulation matters. Dr. Lori Desautels talks a lot about touch points and how they can help. Those micro moments of personal connection help the nervous system to feel safe, secure, and connected. And then the biggest point that I wanted to make today was that this work does take time, patience, and grace. When working with kids with, you could say almost fragile nervous systems, it's hard work. Like there are days that I definitely struggle with kid behavior, and I'm not a behavior specialist, and I definitely struggle with student behavior. But I feel like being able to understand the why behind it and how the nervous system works really helps. I have on here Robert Dilts' domains of influence, because when you look at something like this, you have to think before you can change environment, before you can change skills and behaviors, you really have to look back down at beliefs and values and identity. And that's why this work that we do is challenging, because it can challenge people's beliefs and values and identity. And I feel like if you can plant little seeds, along the way, maybe that looks like you going into a classroom and trying some regulation strategies, or offering kids multiple regulation strategies, and maybe the teacher sees how it works, or just offering little bits and planting those little seeds can actually help to expand and grow some of that success.
Tazen, if you go to their website, and I have the link there, they have a wealth of free resources that you might want to consider if you haven't had a chance. They offer the trauma responsive school community e-learning modules that both Misty and I have done. They offer the mindfulness and school-based yoga training for classroom. And then again, what we talked about earlier in the presentation and kind of throughout, Dr. Lori is offering neuroscience and education e-coaching classes. So how cool it is that she's live and she's teaching these, and she just does a phenomenal job. So those are some possibilities of further training if you're interested. And again, I know Kent Reed sent out the email blast. So if you don't have connections to this, you can answer his email blast. Again, I just cannot thank Misty enough for the work that she did to provide these resources. So we are offering some links right here. She did a great job of, you just click on the link, it'll take you to the book on the Amazon page as well.
And I will say real
to add
quick,
to those?
yeah, I will say real quick, Robin Goebel's book, oh, yep, if you go back down, she has a free ebook. This is a fantastic book. I've even given this book out to some parents who are really struggling with kiddos with behaviors. It's actually based for parents, but it works fantastic for educators as well.
Give me just a second here. Sorry, wasn't supposed to do that. Okay. Okay, again, I'm gonna let you talk about this, Misty, because this is so cool.
Yeah, if you click on if you scan the QR code, or if you have access to the PowerPoint, if you click on the sheet for the resource page, it'll send you to the link. And it has a lot of the different things that we talked about today, the brain science part. It has the Mineola Grows videos, Regulate, Relate, Reason from Dr. Bruce Perry. It does have regulation versus dysregulation, and there's QR codes that link to the different green, red, and blue pathways and what that looks like for students. Co-regulation, Robin Goebel does a fantastic job of describing what co-regulation is and looks like. Tips and tricks, distraction is my biggest helpful thing, I think, to help a student be able to leave a classroom to go to a place that might be a little bit more quieter to help their body get regulated. And then I do have on there the QR codes for the books, the activities, and the trainings as well.
How cool that you can take this and share this with your staff when you're doing these trainings. Okay, one last thing before you go. Actually, we have a couple things if you don't mind. I did put the link to the evaluation in the chat. If you would please fill that out. We so appreciate your feedback. We hope this has been helpful for you today. We meant to start the recording at the beginning, but we got so excited we both forgot. So somebody kindly reminded us about midway through. So we will send out what we have if it's working. So we apologize for that. You can share that with your staff. And I know that Missy and I are going to submit a proposal. We're going to present this at CASCA if they allow us to, and maybe there's another opportunity for us to present again. So thank you all for joining us. But before you go, if you would please share with us, what is one resource or technique that you learned about today that you want to implement? Or maybe what is one resource that you already use that we did not mention? I know somebody talked about conscious discipline on here earlier. So maybe you have some things you're already doing that are working well that we have not mentioned that we want to make sure we share out with the field, okay? So one resource from the presentation that you want to try, or what's a resource that you already use that works pretty well?
Alt, yep, everything.
All the
Regulation
things.
menus, yes, I love it. Fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing your ideas there. We're glad. Okay, so just real quick, we have some amazing upcoming KSDE Zoom meetings throughout the spring semester. Next week, I will be working with Libby Davis, who is a co-founder of Keeping Clean for Coop, because she wants to share with Kansas her experience with fentanyl and some amazing resources. This is both a personal experience as she lost her son to fentanyl, and now she and her family have made a mission to make sure that our Kansas educators and our Kansas families understand the dangers of fentanyl. So I have the registration link there. It's not live, but again, you guys have the PowerPoint presentation, the PDF. Click on our spring schedule. And then also on that spring schedule, if you go down to the bottom, it has all kinds of counselor connections throughout the semester. I know that KCA has a conference coming up in March 1st. Casca has an amazing conference planned for March, excuse me, how about May 28th, so right after Memorial Weekend. I cannot stress enough how great this is going to be. Project Echo with school mental health has 2 sessions a month that are school mental health based. And so we invite all educators and school nurses, and we just have a great specialty team sharing information with you. And then KSDE has a summer conference as well. So feel free to take a look at that. And if you have any questions, Misty and I will stay on here for a little bit. And again, thank you so much for filling out the evaluation and for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Misty, I just wanted to introduce myself to you. I just got offered to be the school psychologist in Humboldt next year, so I'm very excited. I get to work with
Fantastic.
you.
Wonderful. I'm
Yeah.
excited to meet you. That's fantastic.
Yes, this was a fantastic presentation. I'm going with one of my behavioral interventionists in Neodesha next Wednesday to the trauma community support training in Salinas. So
Wonderful. That's
yeah.
amazing. Well, I'm so excited you'll get to work with us.
Oh, me too. Me too.
Yeah.
You are fantastic, Misty. I'm
Oh,
excited.
well, thank you so much.
I'll see you in August.
It sounds good.
Great job, you two.
Thank you, Kent.
Yeah, thank you.
Hopefully some folks will take a deeper dive and pursue the resources that you guys provided, including the TASN series. I noticed that, let's see, how many do we have left on, Mel?
33.
Okay. I noticed that Christina from MTSS was on.
Yes. So somebody else pushed the record, and I've never seen it done before. So how do I stop their recording? Or maybe because it says, oh, here it is. I got it. So we'll have a little bit of, like, probably a little bit more than half of it recorded. Sorry, Misty, we both failed each other
No,
on that.
I totally
told her,
failed on
"Please
it
remind me, 'cause
too.
I'll forget."
And I'm horrible at those things. I'm sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay. It's okay. We got so excited, we just jumped right into it. So you'll at least
exactly.
have something.
Now, Mel, I
Yep.
know you put this in the chat, and you sent out the PowerPoint. Are you going to resend the PowerPoint out?
I can.
Now?
If you want to send what we have of the recording and the PDF, you're welcome to send it out to everybody. You
Okay,
want to do
why
that?
don't you, yeah, why don't you send me what you want sent out, and then we'll get
Okay.
that out this afternoon.
Okay, I will do my best to try to make that work.
Very good.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to hop off, and I'm
Okay.
looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Thank
Take
you,
care.
Missy. It's so good
Yes.
to see you.
I'm happy to do this. So thank
And
you,
Mel, it's always good to see you too.
Thank you, Kent.
We should have a meeting.
Ken.
Sounds good. All right, we're gonna hop off here, guys. If you need anything, email me,
Okay.
text me. Take care.
Perfect. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Misty.
See ya. Thank you.